Hello there. How are you doing, Ralph, this week?
Hi, Peter. I'm good. Excellent. In
Excellent.
fact.
Excellent. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to try and race through this to see, because we've been cut off a few times in the past. Maybe this is the software's way of telling us to get on with it. So,
That you are talking too much. Yes.
yeah, well, no, well, indeed,
Not
indeed.
me.
Well, of course, of course. Let's dive straight into it, right?
All
So,
right. Cool.
we're going to talk about three things today. One is the end of the war. Two is cryptocurrency, because that's been a massive topic. And three, my favourite story of the week, in fact, possibly of the past few years, about Toyota. So anyway, let's start off with the serious, the serious subject of the end of the war. So, Ralph, I mean, you've got some very interesting thoughts in terms of how the Ukraine war could end, or how things could unfold in the next few months. So, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm calling the end of the war,
Hmm.
and obviously I do this mostly because I need to soothe myself, and this is to
Yes.
some extent wishful thinking, to a large extent
Mm.
wishful thinking, but it's just something which I sort of piece together as a feasible or possible scenario as I'm reading about the political developments emanating from Europe and from Russia and the Ukraine.
Hmm.
So what I would just like to start with is to say that currently what we're seeing is that Russia is making slow but unfortunately steady progress. I mean,
Hmm.
that cannot be denied.
Yeah.
And I believe it is becoming just a internecine war of attrition now.
Hmm.
The Russians are pushing, the Ukrainians are not able currently to push back as much as they used to, largely, I believe, because weapons delivered from the US and Europe are not coming to the front line into theater quickly enough. And
Hmm.
that is the situation which we see. But behind that surely must be the fact that the Russian economy is suffering.
Mm.
Recent estimates said that the sanctions have now reduced the economy by 15 to 20%.
Yeah.
We've discussed very briefly the situation of the ruble, and this may
Hmm.
be counterintuitive because the ruble is now super strong against most free world
Hmm.
currencies and against China, well, against actually pretty much every currency.
Mm.
But the reason for that is that Russia has implemented capital controls. The international market in ruble has completely dried up and has fallen away. There's no
Mm.
volume going through ruble trades anymore, which means that any sort of activity the Russian government is choosing to do in order to strengthen the ruble is having a disproportionately
Mm.
powerful impact on the currency.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why we've seen the ruble, after initial weakness, rebounding and now trading at levels which are stronger against the dollar than
Mm.
before we went into the invasion. People
Yeah.
sometimes misread this as thinking that the sanctions aren't working
Yeah.
and that the Russian economy is strong. But that is
Mm.
actually not the case
Mm.
in this particular case. Sometimes it is the case to say that the exchange rate is an indication of a strong currency, of a strong economy. In this case, it is clearly not. So the
Mm.
sanctions are working. The strength of the ruble is actually further harming the Russian economy.
Mm.
Uh, Tragically, Russian soldiers, of course, are dying in large numbers at the front line.
Mhm.
Russia is running out of war material. They've already taken out of mothball
Mm.
ex-Soviet tanks, and they're
Mm.
using increasingly equipment that is very old indeed. And
Mm.
Putin will, of course, know all this. He
Mm.
may have become more irrational very recently, but he's not stupid. Of
Mm.
course, he knows this. What
Mm.
I think he may be seeing is that they are now making steady progress. They are already talking about engineering referendums in the Donbas region.
Mhm.
And that is, I'm going to bring this together in just a moment, but that's one side of the equation. So let's just keep
Mm.
that in mind. The
Mhm.
Russian economy is hurting. There is not that much more they can throw at the war. Currently, they're making progress.
Mhm.
So the other part of the equation is the support which the Ukrainians are getting from the free world.
Yeah.
And it kind of looks to me, if you look at Europe, and I wouldn't exactly say that the unity here is crumbling, but certainly
Mm.
fraying, or in danger of fraying, might be a reasonable way of describing it. There are indications sort of everywhere. I mean, Germany, Olaf Scholz is sort of cagey in their support of Ukraine in terms of rearming the Ukrainians. France, likewise. Recently, skepticism of France in this regard will have seen further support of will have become more potent as Macron is now pretty much unable to rule in his own country following his loss of majority in parliament. So we have now in parliament much more potent voices from the anti-Macron sort of parties, which is basically everybody. It's the communists and the socialists on the one hand, and it's the far right wing Front National under Le Pen on the other hand. Both are in favor of either leaving NATO or not contributing to NATO as much. So we have a weakness from that point of view. Moving on, it goes on. Looking at Italy, the unity there is actually clearly and visibly, there I would say crumbling, because the five-star party is now splitting, and it's splitting over its stance on the Ukraine. Because Draghi is still in favor, the part of the party which has split is not. Into all of this beginning loss of cohesion in Europe, Putin is dropping the bomb that by the end of the year he's going to cut off all gas supply to Europe. That is clearly from Putin sees all this, I'm sure. And it is at least conceivable that he thinks, well, let's pile on more pressure onto a fraying European cohesion. Let us make sure that the Ukraine is getting less and less of military support from the free world. Let us therefore pile pressure on the Ukraine, and at the time when we can't carry on because we're running out of stock, out of weapons, out of everything, which of course we're not telling anybody, but right at the time that we are basically able to take the Donbas, Europe is going to be less inclined to encourage the Ukrainians to fight on. And that might be the time when the cost of peace is going to be finally less than the cost of war. Russia or Putin can go back to his people and sell something as a win. He will therefore make sure that he's not going to be sidelined. He can stay in power. The West can sort of breathe and think, well, let's just go with that uneasy and quite frankly ethically unpalatable peace accord of some description and take the time to regroup, emancipate ourselves from Russia in terms of energy politics and perhaps food. And unfortunately, then we will have to see what else is going on. But just medium term, I do wonder whether we are moving towards that sort of situation. Previously, I said that the parties have to fight themselves to a standstill. That would still be pretty much that sort of situation. It is just that the standstill comes in a different form, not through military impasse, but simply through the loss of support from the free world of the Ukraine, and at the same time, Russia's willingness to sell a territorial annexation of the Donbas as a win at home.
I mean, I think that puts it together, pretty well. I mean, and actually, I'd almost say that would bring it round full circle, wouldn't it, really? Well, I suppose it does if you had got the end of the war, because I think that Putin picked a very, if you were to pick a time to do this, it was a time, that strategically a good time because Europe, was splintering back then. And I think that what the war has done, it has put more pressure and possibly deepened some splits, although it has strengthened some some other relationships as well. I mean, it certainly shows who Ukraine's real friends are, for instance. So, yes, I mean, for the very reasons that they got into the war in the first place, maybe these are the reasons that actually they're going to pull out of the war. But I mean, I've always maintained that, my ideal situation in terms of what it would look like for the world and stability and, longer term peace is that, is if it was not Putin that was in power, either through ill health or something happens to him or whatever it might be. Because as long as he has the reins of power, there's always a chance that this could just happen again. And the other thing as well, though, is that it depends who he's replaced by. If he isn't in power, is he replaced by? Who is he replaced by? Is he replaced by, military people who are even more belligerent than he is, for instance, or will it be a sort of, an opposition uprising, a bit more pro-globe, pro-world, etc.? I mean, that could make a very big difference. But I think whatever happens in terms of him coming, being in power or coming back into power, there's always a chance that this, we're just going to kick the can down the road. This is going to happen again in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or something.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
Yeah. What do you think?
And I'm aware that my scenario is not necessarily a joyful scenario at all.
No.
It calls an end to the war by this year and end of this year, autumn or winter, but it will result in Putin staying in power. But as you say, I think a sustainable, positive solution to this, unfortunately, will have to involve Russia as a properly democratized country. And that I can't really see happening. We've seen this before with Gorbachev. Russia came as close as it's ever been to having a proper democracy with checks and balances and proper democratic functions, but that didn't last and that didn't work. And so you wonder, it is either going to be Putin or one of his members of his coterie. But even then, you see, I mean, that's inconceivable, really, because for that to happen, he would need to be pushed aside. And that would only happen if the cost of war is going to increase the cost of peace in terms of they wouldn't be able to make any progress then. I mean, as long as he can say, look, we've got the Donbass, isn't it great? As long as he is to sell that at home as a win, I can't see him disappearing. And so that's why I'm saying this. I can see perhaps a possibility for the more immediate atrocities to come to an end by winter if these scenarios play out like I painted them. But that in itself, it's exactly what you say. That constitutes a can which is being kicked down the road, because Russia is then going to go back, regroup, remilitarize, modernize its military, and possibly learning the lessons from this situation. The free world is going to do that as well, in terms of remilitarizing the new Iron Curtain, the new borders. And I think, unfortunately, we need to steel ourselves and brace ourselves, looking forward. That's the wrong word. Looking into a world of the future, which is going to be bristling with weapons at the borders of the EU, let's say, and Russia. So it's not joyful, but at least there is a possibility for the dehumanizing tragedy which is playing itself out every day in front of our eyes on the television, and far, far worse in your backyard if you live in the Ukraine, that may come to an end perhaps even by the end of this year. We'll see. It's wishful thinking, but it's a scenario. It's an interpretation of political events. Which,
Again, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I thought it was very interesting. Right, so let us move on then to the next topic, which is cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency has had an absolute shocker of a week. It started off the week by having gone down under $20,000, and so I mean that was a bit of a shocking start anyway. And then you've got other. Well, I suppose you've got, Binance. The chief exec of Binance was painting a very gloomy picture, and said that cryptocurrency could stay below the $69,000 peak for 2 years. So that's not being particularly positive. And also, Celsius, which is one of the companies that has frozen withdrawals of Bitcoin, continued to freeze withdrawals, and then not only that is that, I mean, I suppose it was quite interesting. I mean, there was an article in the Daily Telegraph that was saying how this isn't just one of those buy on the dips scenario. This is, the fall has been huge. 69,000 down to 20,000. The chance of the contagion in other related assets like NFTs, for instance, are bigger. And also the investor base over the last few years has also broadened. I would say, especially under lockdown, for instance, because remember, there wasn't that much to do under lockdown. And so some people decided to take on cryptocurrency as well. So anyway, I think that this is been a very interesting week for cryptocurrencies and for crypto assets generally. I did think it was quite amusing in the sense that we saw Ronaldo, football player Ronaldo, signing a deal to create a range of NFTs with the crypto exchange Binance. Now, as far as I'm concerned, whenever you see celebs stroke football players getting involved in stuff like this, that usually is a bad sign, because it means that they've, things have reached a peak, although obviously cryptocurrency has reached a trough. But anyway, what do you think, Ralph? What do you think about this? Is it all a bit ridiculous? Storm in the teacups, are you going to go up again? Are you going to wade in yourself and throw in the Ralph millions in there?
Well, I follow this discussion with bemusement, let's say. I mean, what I hear is all these various statements which you have just referenced, and I'm thinking people talk about this as if they can talk about this like any other asset class. Oh, it's now below 69,000. This time it's going to be not recovering. How does anybody know? There is no one reference to any valuation model which I know that would actually put a economically calculated value on any of the cryptocurrencies, or at least I would challenge anybody to show me the valuation model and tell me how they could actually come up with a value of X. 69,000, 16,000. Who says 16,000 is cheap? Maybe 16,000 is expensive. I'm quite shocked that it went up from $1,000 like 20 years ago to whatever 20,000. So I mean, you see, I'm in no doubt that there is some transformational technology here, but the transformational technology is blockchain. And the various cryptocurrencies run off blockchain. And to the extent that we're doing transactions on the blockchain in the currency, you could even argue that to some extent the cryptocurrency is identical to the blockchain. That's not going to be like that in the future. You cannot, won't be able to argue this in the future when we have proper commoditized transactions run on a blockchain. Smart contracts, for example, things like that. Nothing fancy, like for example, my contract with my plumber as a smart contract which auto-executes once the plumber has been. I check a box somewhere which says, yes, he has been or she has been, work was executed well, toilet hasn't blown up. Cool.
Yeah. It's always good to know whether that hasn't blown up, isn't it? Really.
Well, but in light of our next story, which I'm not going to anticipate,
very good. Very good.
You wonder actually. But anyway, so this toilet hasn't blown up, which is wicked. And so you check the box on the smart contract. The funds, which until that time have been in escrow account, are released to the plumber. The fact that this is the case increases the cash flow certainty of these merchants, and by extension their credit worthiness, etc. So that, I think, is going to translate into a real measurable, real world benefit to our economies. And in addition to that, we have the metaverse. This is getting like science fiction-y a little bit now, but we've got the metaverse of the future running off blockchain. We've got Internet of Things, which is arguably the next step for the internet, and it's enmeshed very tightly, again, to the extent that it might be identical to some extent with the metaverse. All of that is going to run off blockchain. We're going to have all the transactions which are involved in, for example, selling and buying property, surveying, all of that is basically not going to be necessary anymore, because the information which is involved in the chain which represents selling and buying a property is all encrypted safely and unchangeably on the blockchain. So the revolution of blockchain, I think, is going to be that it's going to make all of various intermediaries superfluous. And once we see that, then I think we have a valuable commodity. Then we can actually value the earnings or the fees which are coming off the blockchain, put a value on it. The blockchain itself might IPO, and then we have a real-time product. A real world solid product. What we currently have is some weird fiction of value which people assign to a currency which doesn't really do much in the real world, which promises us benefits in the nature of being unsupervised by governments, which quite frankly in the free world doesn't actually do much for you. It does do something for you if you live in developing non-industrialized countries. That is true, but again, that is, it's not clear to me how that can be monetized and therefore translated into value. So in the end, I don't know what is going on in the various cryptocurrencies. I don't know why there were at these swindling heights of valuations anyway. I would put some money in it if I had any, just as play money and see where it's going. But that's not an investment. That's just being... And perhaps, I mean, there's always a caveat. I may certainly not understand all the technology in detail. I mean, I freely admit this, and maybe somebody can send me a valuation model so that I can take a look.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say things like this, because you can't really value it. You can't really value it. It's the sort of, it is the realm of the technical analysts, isn't it? You know, the talking about the patterns of the graphs and all this kind of thing. And I mean, again, I was subjected to that when I was a stockbroker and covering Japan. we did have technical, because until then I thought a technical analyst was an analyst that covered the technical sector, or tech sector.
Right, okay.
And then like I say, then I covered started covering Japan. And we started having these guys, looking. So what they do, just for those of you who don't know, what they do is they look at the way graphs, like they look at patterns on graphs, and then they will notice these patterns, and then they will say, okay, so if it breaks this level, the next level is going to be this, and then it's going to do this and this and this. And I always thought that it was akin to tea leaf reading.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now,
That's
and
right.
I was very doubtful of it. However, it does work for some people, and I do actually think that it's all based on the psychology of the market, and so actually I don't think it's tea leaf reading. It's better than that, But I do remember again, when I was broking, what I used to try and do is I used fundamental analysis of the analysts, of our analyst reports, and then my own just sort of looking at things, and then did an overview, saw what the technical analysts thought of these things. And if all of these, I would then come up with a list where it all aligned. And they did all right, actually. They did okay. But the only thing is, I think that this has to be, because there is no fundamental analysis really on it. I think that's all you've got, really. You could just go, oh, yeah, there's a dropped shoulder, and therefore such and such pattern. I mean, there's all these names for all these patterns.
Well, I think I think people who are watching the video see me squirm and do weird grimaces with my face, because I do think it is at best tea leaf reading, and that's a very nice way of actually saying what it actually is. Now, that's not saying that there is not psychology in the markets. Absolutely. And of course, the psychology is reflected in the volatility which you see.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But technical analysis is basically holding a ruler. You basically print it out, and then you take a ruler and you say, "Oh, this is like the support level, isn't it?"
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah,
and this is. I mean, no, it's not. It's complete nonsense. It happens to be that there are two troughs, and you put a ruler to it, and they draw a line through it. Doesn't mean there's a support level of any kind.
No,
and
exactly.
Sometimes there might be, in which case the technical analysis trumpets about the great success which they had, but then often there isn't, in which case it wasn't quite the support level yet. So then you take your ruler and put it to different troughs until you find such a trough from which it rebounds, and then from hindsight you proclaim that it has look, and head and shoulders. I mean, what does that exactly mean? Well, there's a bit which sticks out over the other bits, and that looks a bit shampoo, like a head, and that looks a bit like shoulders, doesn't it? Look, but that is not to say that this type of analysis isn't meaningful. But what you have to do is you have to use statistical models and look at the data behind it and put some patterns through it, machine learning, etc. The problem is with these statistical models is that the predictive value of them decays quite quickly over time. So you can actually basically project something out into the future, which is future measured by 1 day, 2 days. And there have been people who have been spectacularly successful at it. I know one particular person, he also happens to be a named mathematician, a genius mathematician. So I think there is absolutely value.
There is something in it. There is something in it, but
you have to be an extremely gifted mathematician or physicist in order to do that. It isn't enough to take your ruler out and shout there's a head and shoulders level. Anyway, and in Bitcoin you can't even do that, because basically we have only two lines. One goes up and the other one goes down. But anyway, so I don't know how the cryptocurrencies are evaluated. As I said, in the future I am sure there is some excellent technology behind it. It is in its infancy, and I do not believe that you can be you can put a proper economic value on it. But
indeed, brilliant.
Always space for speculation, and it's like the tulip bubble in the 19th century, where people were happy to pay $5,000 for a tulip, and it was actually no more than a tulip.
Yeah. Brilliant.
But it wasn't actually worth that, as it then turned out.
No, indeed.
I don't know why.
So anyway, I mean, there we go. I mean, I think will cryptocurrency will no doubt be generating more entertainment as time goes on. But
value, actually.
Yes, but
in
really, yes. But really, I think we're gonna finish on what I think is the most entertaining story, not only this week but for quite some time. This is the best story. I think this is even better than my previous favourite story of, I think it was last year, which was about that electric truck company, Nikola, who were accused of basically not having their own technology. The technology that they did have didn't work, and that it famously used like a marketing video of one of its trucks seemingly driving along a road when in actual fact the engine didn't work, and they pushed the they found a hill and they pushed the lorry down the hill, and when they filmed it, they changed the angle to make it look like it was going on a straight bit of road. Absolutely genius. But this is even better, in my opinion, because that, I mean, in a way, there's sort of an excuse for that, because that's it's a young company. It was SPAC backed and all that. This is Toyota, right? So Toyota, they have this SUV, which has the ridiculous name, the BZ4X, and they Toyota ordered a recall of this car because apparently there was a chance that the wheels would fall off. Now, that is just absolutely ridiculous. This story just keeps on giving, right? So absolutely brilliant. So there was a guy, an automotive analyst called Seiji Sugiura, who's from Tokai Tokyo Research Institute. And when asked by the very experienced FT journalists who did this, who are Japanese, what his thoughts were, he said Toyota might want to show that they are extremely careful of the first launch of their EVs. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I do think that when you release a car or a vehicle of any kind, I do tend to expect the wheels will stay on, and so therefore I would argue that being careful would be indicated by releasing a car whose wheels stay on. So anyway, I mean, absolutely unbelievable. But I mean, what do you reckon? I mean, do you think you'd? I mean, it might be quite entertaining, mightn't it? I mean, driving a car whose wheels may or may not fall off. I don't know.
I can't add anything to this. I mean, I find it quite astonishing that this happened.
Yeah.
What did occur to me is that maybe the branding department of Toyota could get together and they could call it the Toyota Freewheeler.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is a keeper, Ralph. That's definitely a keeper.
And I think that's all I have to contribute.
That is so good. I mean, yeah, it just sounds right, doesn't it? It sounds right. It fits. It tells a story. I mean, yeah. I mean,
especially if they did like an off-roader.
yeah. Oh God, yeah. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I drive a Toyota BZ4X, or I drive a Toyota Freewheeler. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, it's just so much better, I think.
Yeah.
So So Toyota.
Oh, by the way, does this wheeling situation, is that including the steering wheel as far as you know?
No, because of course that'll stay on.
Of course. Stay on. I'm being silly now. Yeah, this stays on.
Because that would,
it's not like, hello.
Well, like F. Mind you, though, maybe it'd be like F1, wouldn't it? Where you just sort of take it and take. And also, that would be quite good as a security thing, isn't it? I mean, people won't steal your car if it doesn't have any wheels on it on the outside. I mean, it's always very difficult. And then if you take the steering wheel away as well, then
People, and also, of course, if you drive if you drive this car into certain areas of town, I mean, the thieves and band members or gang members. I'm sorry, you can see I lead a shielded life. So the gang members come on and say, "Oh, excellent! Just take the wheels away. You don't actually have to do anything."
No, exactly. It's just we just look at them and they'll fall off. So yeah, I mean, and by the way, actually in this, I forgot to say in the actual thing it said that one of the suggested solutions for this was we might need to tighten the bolts.
Seriously?
It's brilliant. We might need to tighten the bolts. So there we go. I mean, engineering at its finest. And brilliant. I'm thinking, you can have a really good sort of family day out, in the car when you're driving along and you're wanting to entertain everyone. You can, there's the song, the wheels on the bus go round and round. The wheels on my Toyota go off and off, off and off, off and off. And it'd be quite good, wouldn't it? I mean, it'd be the new big thing. Be a great TikTok, I'm sure.
Then ever so often, Dad gets out of the car to tighten the bolts.
Either that, or of course, when they notice all those sparks flying out at the back, you might have to stop, then go and get the wheel, and then put it back on. But yeah. So anyway,
so I mean, I'm sorry, there was absolutely no contribution I could make to this situation. Nor can I put a commercial spin on this. This is spin. Oh my goodness, I said it again.
There we go. You see, I have to say, I personally believe that your huge contribution to this was the naming of the new vehicle of the Toyota three-wheeler. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's my trademark. I will receive commission on money from Toyota for this one.
Excellent. Excellent. All good. Cool. Anyway, so I think on that note, we shall, on the altogether more uplifting note than what we started on, I think we'll stop there. But thank you very much, Ralph. Always a pleasure. And obviously we'll be back again for more next week.
Excellent. Okay. Always a pleasure to be on the show, Peter.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.